Independent grind, powered by Tech Nine.
All right, man. Before even diving into your music, just kind of based off of your appearance, you're clearly not, a cookie cutter rapper, if you will. You're not trying to follow any type of trend. So where does that mentality come from?
I think I've always kind of had like a don't give a fuck mentality, just like kind of just being me. But I also think when it comes specifically to my image, like a lot of that stems from like where my priorities are. My priorities aren't necessarily like being perfect haircut. It's just I like to just fucking sleep in, wake up, make music, and if I kind of look a little bummy that day and I'm wearing sweatpants, then I am. So that's kind of like where that comes from. Once I kind of realized that people fuck with me, like just being like the real version of me, I kind of like stopped caring about that shit at all and just started wearing whatever the fuck I want, looking how the fuck I want. You feel me?
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like that's kind of, in your lane, like that's kind of a mentality that a couple of, a decent amount of people would have, like just kind of in the whole era of rap music that's coming up. It's like people are just wearing whatever, dude. Like people are wearing flip-flops around everywhere,
Definitely.
Absolutely. So within the last couple of years, we've been noticing hints of punk, like the punk sound within rap music with guys like Lil Uzi, Lil West, who we know you've done some work with, and even further back with guys like Wayne. But at what point did you start mixing the two genres? I mean, did one come before the other, or which kind of came first for you?
So, I came up making, I was in a bunch of bands, playing guitar, singing in like pop punk bands, a bunch of different rock bands. And that was kind of like the scene in Indiana that I came up in. And it wasn't until a little bit later in my like musical journey that I kind of got into more of the rap and R&B, urban influences. And you can kind of hear that in like the first instances of like the songs I released as Lil Aaron. They definitely weren't as punk influenced, but you can still hear like in the way of my like vocal performance on songs like Damn or About Time that was still kind of like seeing like a pop punk vocalist over trap beats. And then it wasn't until I really dove into creating Glowing Pains that I decided to like really mesh the two. And it's really interesting because when I made Drugs, that was a point where I was like listening to Lil Wayne Rebirth a bunch, just because it's funny that you guys bring up Lil Wayne, because like I think he's one of my favorite, or that project is one of my favorite explorations of like, I guess technically rap rock, but it's more like, that punk guitar with like the new age auto-tune rap, like more like, it's just like fun party music, but it's got the best of both sides. And that was like kind of a jumping off point for me. It was like, I really like, I was kind of trying to pick up where he left off with that whole like, what happens when you have these like power chords and you kind of like sing, rap, auto-tune, whatever on top of it. So that's kind of how that all came together. And yeah, like there's a couple artists that in the past couple of years have done it really well, in my opinion. But Lil Wayne was one of my favorites. So
Definitely, yeah, that's dope, and you can definitely kind of hear that influence in songs like Drugs. Like he kind of had that punk and grunge and like like Prom Queen, I think the track was, which I know he had like a big Nirvana influence for. So that's really dope.
exactly.
Yeah, like you're picking it up and it's all coming full circle. And kind of still going on that, you've got songs like Drugs that would appeal to somebody that's like, super into Blink-182 or some different stuff.
Right.
But then you've also got the stuff like Four More Drinks, and all of that. But what was kind of like, whenever you're going into it, I mean, a lot of people would see those two as two totally different genres, but you obviously saw, like some people are fans of both or whatever. Is there any certain demographic you were going for with Glowing Pains, like meshing those two demographics?
I think there's like two main, it's not necessarily a certain fan base, but like mentalities that I was going for. It's like, one is I think people are bored of everybody making the same shit. So I was like, as long as I make something different, I know people are gonna gravitate towards it because there's so many artists out there just making the exact same type of music. It just kind of gets repetitive and boring. And then also, like, I knew that I knew that, like, just because I had that kind of bringing in music, where, like, I started with pop punk and like rock music, and like I was first exposed to that music, and then kind of later in like high school, beyond that, I started listening to rap. Like, I knew that there was other kids out there that kind of had a similar with their music taste, I guess you could say. And like, it's been a long enough time since that whole pop punk like bubble, which was in my case was like 5 or 6 years ago. I think it's been a long enough time for it to kind of come full circle, because right after any fad like that, like, it becomes like something becomes really cool, and then right after it becomes really not cool, and you have to wait like a couple of years, and then it's like nostalgic cool again.
Yeah.
So I kind of felt like it was time to start like sprinkling that in, and then a lot of these kids would start like coming back around to it, and I even think I might have been a little early to it. I think like in the next year or two, it's gonna like come back super strong. But I really wanted to like have Glowing Pains as this project that really kind of like sets the pace for like rap rock in 2016, 2017, 2018.
Hell yeah.
For sure. And I think it's funny you mentioned how like, you know, people are kind of getting sick of, you know, the mainstream industry, I guess, if you will. Because I feel like that, like, if you look back through all of, you know, the last 60, 70 years, like, any major album or any major genre has started because, like, people are just like, you know, we're sick of doing the same thing. Let's do something different.
Oh yeah.
Exactly
Exactly what you're doing.
Exactly. And like, I always wanted to like I don't know if I always knew I wanted to make this kind of music, but now that I've made it, I realize I always did. I was always kind of like trying to cater to like, you know, but either like I thought the fans wanted, or what, like, you know, some suit wanted, or what so and so wanted. Like, and this was really a project where I kind of got to like be in a place where, like, I don't give a fuck if anyone likes this. I'm gonna make something I like, and that's kind of like when it fully became a project that a lot of people liked.
Yeah, definitely. And that's also kind of funny you say that. One of the things we'll talk about here at the office, and like where we think rap is starting to go, is it's almost like it almost has like that metal influence, even for the people that aren't necessarily incorporating the rock, but like that heavy bass that we're hearing. Like, dude, it literally sounds just like a metal show would, you know. And we saw that you actually did a performance at the Riot Room, and we'll see a lot of people. I mean, you could go to like a Freddie Gibbs show and see the same guy that you would see at like a Norma Jean show or something, you know.
That's hilarious. I love Norma Jean. And no, and that was another part of it too. Is like, I see like artists like Travis Scott or like Kanye even, and they're like taking like aesthetic ideas and like design ideas from metal bands or from like punk bands, and they're like they're dancing around the idea of like incorporating it, but they won't dive in.
Yeah.
So, but at the same time, you go to a Travis Scott show, there's going to be kids moshing, there's going to be kids diving for the microphone, and like, it's going to look like if you were deaf and you just saw that show, and then you saw a fucking, you know, Norma Jean or whoever, you know, play, like, it's gonna look the same. It's gonna like there's the same energy. The kids go crazy. Like, you go to the Monster Outbreak tour, and then you go to Travis Scott and Kanye. Like, you know, Kanye's new tour setup like it's made to have like a big pit for kids to just mosh to. So it's like it's the same energy. I kind of feel like, you know, a lot of those artists on the rap side of it, they play around with little aspects of it, but I don't think any of them were, you know, there's a couple artists. I think like Cudi has played around with some punk aspects, but like nobody really like dove into it. And that was kind of the idea with this, is just like, let's just fucking dive into it. I'm lucky enough to be at a place where like I'm not going to lose anything. I'm still like developing my sound, so like might as well start off experimental and weird and dope, so that I don't get pigeonholed in some lane that I'm not.
Oh yeah.
That's a really good mindset to have going into your debut album. And so
Thank you.
speaking of your debut album, I wanted to talk about your album art for Glowing Pains. It's you have that vibrant lime green color with you on the cross, and I've noticed hip hop in general kind of have, I guess, album covers aren't really the brightest. They kind of tend to be darker.
Right.
But yours kind of stands out. How did you come up with that idea for your art?
Well, the green has kind of been like my thing for a while, just 'cause, like when things started to happen for me with music, like I just had green hair, and it was just kind of like an easy way for people to recognize me. So we just ran with it, and then we incorporated the green goggles, and like just slowly everything became that green. I don't know if I would say green is my favorite color. I love that specific green, especially because it's like something that like I can accessorize that green with black and it stands out, and nobody's really like, it's a weird color where it's like it's bright, but it's still like it doesn't take away from anything. So we kind of like, once we had that green, we were playing around with other ideas, and I had always kind of had this idea of not always, but for a while, even before Glowing Pains was like fully created, I had this idea for like a visual of me hanging on a cross of high school lockers. And the whole idea behind that was kind of like, I dropped out of high school. I really didn't like high school. High school was not the place for me. I'm kind of like passionately against the public school system. I think it's really fucked up. But through that, I think that's kind of where in like a weird way, that's kind of where I like developed a lot of like my mentalities on life, and like a lot of like my whole like underdog type thing. When you're in high school and you're like someone like me, it's like you're not, I'm making music, but like I'm not popping off by any means. So it's like everyone thinks you're on this weird pipe dream. It's like everyone is so ready to just go to like college and then like be a doctor or a lawyer, where I'm like in classes like, no, like I have these ideas in my head. I'm gonna go to LA. I want to be a rock star. I want to be an artist. And like everybody kind of like laughs at you when you have those ideas. And so the whole idea behind that was, it was there's a double meaning there, but part of it was kind of like crucified by the public school system, and like how I just feel like that kind of helped going through all that. I mean, everybody these days, like every big artist talks about, I was bullied in high school. I'm not necessarily trying to pull that card, but like when you're so misunderstood, you kind of like have to like really understand yourself. So it was partly that, and then also like the cross covered in a bunch of like, there's all the stickers, and it's like there's some rap artists, some rock artists, some emo artists, some skate stickers, some, it's just like all this shit. Another thing where like this whole idea of like staying in a lane has never really like meant anything to me, because I've always been inspired by and about so many different forms of music and forms of art, and like like I'd never wanted to like, that's why I fucking like made this album where it's like it's every song fits together, but there's like a punk song, there's like a what I'm saying, there's so many different genres in one thing, because I didn't want to have to just pick one lane.
Yeah, definitely. No, that's dope. I mean, you can really tell that it's a big mesh of everything. And it's crazy you say that. Like you said, a lot of artists, especially the ones that, like the Kid Cudis that play around with a bunch of different sounds and stuff, they would also, I feel like, usually have the same, kind of, dislike for the public school system or just the school system in general and stuff.
I think that like that whole system is flawed, just because it's built to work for 90% of kids, but then the 10% of kids that are the creative minds that are really going to change the world are kind of disregarded. So I feel like it's a common feeling for like people that are like me, or like, just artists to really kind of feel shorted by the public school system.
Yeah, absolutely. Just because it's like, I mean, I don't know. I feel like a lot of people I even knew were kind of that way. It was like, I don't know. They're just so interested into something else. It's like there's no way you can just contain them in a classroom and expect for it to be like,
Exactly.
you know.
And like the whole idea that like ADD is a bad thing is so funny to me. Like
Yeah.
I can't focus on a single thing, but like that's because I'm thinking of 10 dope things at once. Like don't try to sit me in a classroom and like force me to take a test. Like that's just stupid.
Yeah, definitely. Most definitely hear you 100%. So kind of switching gears and talking about, you know, just the scene in Indiana. We hadn't heard a lot out of there for quite some time, you know, and I mean, I feel like Kansas City and Missouri in general could be pretty similar, but we're starting to see a lot of guys pop up. Actually, some guys that we've had the chance to talk to, Draco McCoy, Matthias Young, Xavier Clark, and a couple of other guys out of Indianapolis.
Jacob McCoy is a homie. I fuck with him super hard.
Hell yeah, he's dope as hell, dude. All those guys have a lot of shit going for them, you know. It's like they aren't putting out bad tracks at all. But I would say just from like an overall aspect, like the heavy bass, you know, somewhat of a trap sound. You guys, Indiana's kind of all coming up on one certain wave. Can you pinpoint anything that's kind of inspired that sound? For all the young guys coming out of there?
I don't know, man. I think like Indiana probably similar to you guys are from Kansas City, right?
Yep.
Probably similar to Kansas City. It's just like it gets real cold in the winter and there's nothing to do. Everything closes at 9 p.m., you know, like there's just nothing to do. So like I think part of it is like you get kind of like it gets dark and depressing, and like that's where some of those dark sounds come from, where it's just like if you're a creative mind, you're gonna like the way you're gonna deal with some of those feelings is just like making weird dope shit.
Yeah.
And like I also think that like especially for Indiana, for me at least, like the biggest scene growing up was like the metal scene. You would go to like the VFWs and see the metal bands.
Oh yeah.
So it kind of makes sense that like some of that darker, harder music would make its way into hip hop.
Definitely.
That's cool, and that's very true about about where we're from. It's just like
Cold
right
and
now we're
boring.
hitting that cold, boring state, and we'll be in that warm, boring state pretty soon.
Exactly. There's just never anything to do except for create.
Yeah, dude. Like nothing cool comes here. Like occasionally we'll get a decent tour, but I'm always seeing like badass pop-up shops all over the place, and it's like not in Kansas City. Like,
exactly.
Yeah. So outside of your own music, we know you've written songs for other artists and some pretty big names too. Do you ever have like any prejudgments going in, or prejudgments of the artist, you know, before you hop into the studio, and then that completely changes afterwards?
Yeah, you know, not anymore. But when I first was getting into songwriting, there's definitely some sessions or artists that like my manager or my publisher would say I should work with. And at first I'd be like, man, I don't know, like they did this song, I think it's kind of corny, blah 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 blah. But then like 9 times out of 10 when I felt that way, like I would go in and work with them, and they'd be a cool ass person, and they're just down to try new shit. So like really early on, I kind of like corrected myself on that. But like, you know, like, and it really helps me with just being a fan of music in general and being more open-minded, because like I don't know, I feel like anyone who has the guts to step out and be an artist, whether or not you're writing your own songs, whether or not, you know what I'm saying, you still have to like put yourself out there. I think anyone who has the guts to do that is admirable and like has something to say and has like, you know, a story to tell. So like I love working with all different kind of artists, like young, old, anybody who's just down to try new weird shit. Like I'm never gonna go in with an artist and write a song that sounds like the song they just put out. So like they always have to be down to just try out shit. But I can't lie. Earlier on, there was definitely some sessions where I was like, man, I don't think I'm gonna like this person. But then like 5 minutes in, I was like, damn, I'm an asshole. This is like such a nice person. Like, I become friends with them, and then the rest is history. So.
oh yeah, no, absolutely, that's dope. And definitely true about what you say. I mean, obviously there's some where it's like, I don't know, I don't want to say any names, but it's like, dude, like, you're literally just like a figurehead. Like,
Yeah.
people are clearly telling you what to do in the studio, but that's dope. I mean, definitely a cool way of thinking about it, for sure. So, and then one of the other things we want to talk to you about was we saw that Chief Keef, one of the Glow Boys, was actually wearing some of your merch. How the hell did that come about, and how stoked were you to see him rocking that?
Man, so we're on tour still right now, and that was only like a couple days ago, probably less than a week ago. And I woke up. We were in the hotel. I woke up to Rashawn, one of my graphic designers, and I just hear him on the phone, and he's just like, Chief Keef? What? Yeah, I know. I'll look right now. And then I wake up because I hear Chief Keef, and like me being the like self-centered person I am, I'm like, Chief Keef, like, did Chief Keef like say something about me? Like, what? Like, all I heard was Chief Keef, and I like assumed it was about me. And he's like, go on Instagram right now. So I went on Instagram and went to his page, and he was wearing that patch, and we were all like flipping out. It was probably like 7 a.m. and we had a late night. We're all tired, going, like, what the fuck happened? Like, we're all just like texting our homies, like trying to figure out how this shit happened. And then what we figured out was one of my the guy that like runs my merch store is friends with one of Chief Keef's like producers, I think. And he had sent him one of the patches, but he didn't want to say anything to me because he didn't want me to get my hopes up, and then, you know, Chief Keef didn't like it and didn't do anything with it, so he just sent it to him and didn't say anything. And the funny thing is, he sent it to him like the day before, so like he got it that morning and put it on his jacket that day.
No
which is
way.
insane. Yeah.
Yeah, dude, that's dope as hell.
That's nuts. That's got to be. I assume that's the craziest way to get, like, you just wake up the next day and just boom, Chief Keef's got your.
Yeah.
Yeah,
got
I
your
mean,
gear
'cause,
rocking.
yo, like the whole idea of the project Glowing Pains, like Chief Keef invented glow. Like, glow is his word. I was always like a little cautious. I was like, I don't want Chief Keef to feel like I'm stealing the word glow from him, because like that's like Glow Gang. Like, they are glow. They created glow.
Yeah.
That's them. I was kind of like paying homage in a way, and for him to like. I mean, for him to just like support like that, which I don't even know if he knows who I am yet, but he will soon. But like, even that like small nod was like meant the world to me. So.
Oh, I bet.
Definitely, that's dope.
So who's been the craziest person to show love to your music then?
The craziest person to show love, man. I mean, I guess Keith, even though he didn't necessarily show love to the music. Man, craziest person to show love. This probably sounds corny, but it's got to be the kids, man. Like, all these dope artists are like really cool to me, and it means a lot. But like, having all these kids like hit me up and say like, "Yo, like, I've listened to Growing Pains like 3 times a day, every single day since it came out. Like, this shit, like, I feel you." That's probably the coolest shit to me. Like, just the kids like that are, because I just want to tell a story to, like, you know, the high school version of me that was just like, yo, like, I was just sitting there in class, like, how the fuck do I make this happen? Like, I'm here, I'm square one. How do I fucking, you know, I want to be that kid that I'm listening to on my iPod, and having the tables turn and being the artist that's creating the music that these kids in high school are listening to is fucking, that's the most insane part. The fact that, like, 4 years later, like, I'm actually in a position to, like, be talking to these kids and, like, helping them through, you know, life is fucking insane to me.
Oh, hell yeah.
It's a wonderful role reversal to be in those shoes now.
Definitely incredible.
Yeah, it's surreal.
And one way I think you know your music is making a difference or getting traction, becoming popular, is when you receive some hate. And we saw, it was like the funniest thing. I got to ask how that happened, but we saw that someone was like, he was like, you know, your music sucks, and then you end up with his girl that night or something. How the hell did that happen?
No, that's a funny story. So yeah, I got put on that Lil Yachty show, which I knew from the jump, like, that there was gonna be some Lil Yachty fans that didn't fuck with my music. There's a lot of people. I make very polarizing music. I realize that. I kind of like that. I love that about my music. People like it or they don't. And I knew just going into it. I mean, I love Lil Yachty. he's got some really open-minded fans. But he's at the point now where he's big enough that he's kind of got that like white frat boy, like only listens to what's poppin' type fan base. So I knew that was coming. And it was funny. So this kid DMs me. I'm in the green room before the show. He's like, "You fucking suck," all this shit. And then so I posted the DM on Instagram, like just the DM as a joke. I was like, "Hey, I love my fans." And what's funny is after I had posted that, I looked further into it, and I'm like clicking through his Instagram, and I see that he posted a picture with his girl. I was like, wait a second, she looks familiar. And as it would have it, that same girl, before I had no idea that they had any like correlation or knew each other, or let alone were dating. She had DM'd me like 4 days earlier, like, "Hey, I'm coming to the show, like, big fan, just found your music, blah, blah, blah. You should come over to my crib and pregame before the show." So I was like, interesting. This is gonna be really fucking good. So it kind of like all played out, and then at the end of the show, I was like, I gotta go find this girl. So I walk out into the show, like into the like mezzanine or whatever, and they were both standing together, like the girl and the dude who had DM'd me. And I just walked up straight up to her, and she runs up and gives me a hug. She's like, "You killed it. It was amazing, blah, blah, blah." And I just look over at him, I'm like, "How'd you like it?" And he was like, "It was okay." And then, like, I get a picture with the girl and everything, and he, like, runs away, and, like, it was just the funniest thing.
Yeah, that's classic.
That's like straight out of a movie.
Yeah, really.
It was for real. It did not feel real. I was like, this is, like, and even when I posted it, all my friends were like, "Bro, is this fake?" Because, I'm always up to some shit, like, but, like, that was as real as it could get.
Yeah, that's the last time that dude ever talked shit to anybody through a DM. Like, that came
No,
back
the
and bit
funniest
him
part
in the
is that he was still, even after, like, I obviously, like, bodied him, he was still, like, on Twitter, like, "You look like Hagrid, you look like Shrek." And then this point, all my fans were just, like, they kind of took care of the rest. They just went and bodied him, and, like, you should have seen his Instagram page. Like, every single picture had like 40, 50 comments of the battery emoji, because that's the emoji I use for everything. He was just like, there's no way he can live this one down.
Oh yeah, dude, that's classic. There's also classic that you got that emoji to go with your whole brand and everything, because that's just gonna be like popping up all over the place.
Yeah, definitely. It's just the perfect green. I mean, Drake used it, but he's moved on. I'm the green.
Yeah.
I gotta rep the green.
You got it.
Got to. Well, I think that's pretty much all we've got as far as questions go, but is there anything else you want to kind of get out there before we close out?
I fuck with strange music super hard, so I'll get that out there. I definitely would love to work with almost any strange music artist. I've been a Tech Nine fan for a minute, and obviously a lot of the other artists you guys are bringing up are really cool. So I fuck with you guys. I fuck with the movement. I'm glad you guys fuck with the Glowing Paints movement. So hopefully someday we can get some work in.
This is the genius, Chris Calico. Cali, baby. Letting you know you're tuned into Tech Nine's independent grind on Dash Radio.